There were two mothers and they were discussing their sons' respective progress at college. The first one said, "Our son is so clever. Every time he sends a letter home, we have to go to the dictionary." The other mother replied, "You're lucky. Every time our son sends a letter home, we have to go to the checkbook." Well, every time you go to this season of Lent, it's probably good to look at the dictionary and look at what this word actually means. It's an Old English word, Lent, an Old English word for spring. And specifically the lengthening of daylight hours. We spring forward in about 4 days. And around the 3rd century, a little bit like Christmas, the church took over this word and took it over for the 40 days leading up to Easter, beginning Ash Wednesday. It's actually 46 days until Easter, but Sundays are not included in Lent. Sundays are mini Easters in some way. So if you're giving up coffee or video games, I don't know what it might be, Easter's the day to perhaps celebrate again, a celebratory day. But the day before Lent, in sort of the 8th, 9th century, was very much an unbroken celebration of indulgences. It was that last gasp of music and entertainment and food and drink before the 40 days would begin, of personal abstinence and reflection and fasting. And the word describing these indulgences the day before Lent was a combination of two words. The word carne, which is a word for meat or flesh, you hear carnivore, and the word veil, which means goodbye or farewell. So it was carnivale, which is goodbye to flesh or meat as we start Lent. And of course, it's the word that gives us carnival, a day of revelry and an entertainment, carnival. And it's again an ancient word, and it signifies the day before Lent. We're in Lent as of today. There was a group of chess enthusiasts standing in the lobby of a large hotel, and they were just going on and on about their recent chess tournament victories. Finally, the hotel manager came out of the office. He could take it no longer and told them to disperse. "But why?" said one of the chess players. The manager said, "Because I can't stand chestnuts boasting in an open foyer." When my older son Ethan was aged about 7 or 8, he tried out the game of chess. I think it was mainly because of the intriguing, ornate figures, the castle and the knight and the king. It wasn't so much the complicated rules of chess. But being the affirming father that I try to be, I was happy to let him win as we played chess. The actual truth is I didn't let him. He easily beat me. But in losing chess, in losing these games to him, I won because his confidence, his enthusiasm, his overall well-being was better for it. By losing, I won. That's very much what Jesus was saying as he began to prophesy and predict his journey to Jerusalem. Central to the game of chess is to do what? Is to protect the king at all costs. And in chess, when the king falls, the game is over, the kingdom is lost. D-Day, 6th of June 1944, the Allied invasion of Normandy was about to take place, and the British Prime Minister, Winston Churchill, desperately wanted to join the expeditionary forces and watch the invasion from the bridge of a battleship in the English Channel. US General Dwight Eisenhower was desperate to stop him, fearing that the Prime Minister might be killed in battle. Churchill would not be dissuaded. He wanted to be on that battleship. So Eisenhower was quite wise, and he appealed to a higher authority, not quite that high, but to King George VI. King George VI told Churchill that if it was the Prime Minister's duty to witness the Allied invasion, he could only conclude that it was his duty as king to join him on the battleship. At this point, Churchill reluctantly agreed to back down, for he knew he could never expose the king of Great Britain to such dangers. You see, one must protect the king at all costs. Jesus, the King of Kings, does exactly the opposite. With royal courage, he surrenders his body to be crucified on a cross. He offered a king's ransom. His life for the life of his people. The very phrase checkmate, you might know, is Arabian for the king is defeated. In the mid-1950s, Parker Brothers, who have always brought out different games, brought out a game called Going to Jerusalem. Natural game, and you can see on the slide the board is a bit like the game of life with squares. And the first square is Bethlehem. And then there's different stops at the Mount of Olives, the Stormy Sea, Nazareth, Capernaum. The winner, you might just be able to see at the bottom right-hand corner, is whoever rolls the right dice and answers some New Testament questions that reaches the Palm Sunday square first. That's when the game ends. That's the triumph of Parker Brothers' game. Unlike the Parker Brothers version, the road to Jerusalem, the journey to Jerusalem prophesied by Jesus in the gospel reading, finds its victory and defeat on Good Friday. It's losing to win. Jesus made it clear that it was now necessary for him to go to Jerusalem, Matthew 16, submit to an ordeal of suffering, be killed, and on the third day be raised up alive. Peter took him in hand. Jesus, this can never be. But Jesus didn't swerve. Get behind me, Satan, for you have no idea how God works. Do we have an idea of how God works? On April the 26th, 2008, the name of Sarah Tutulski became famous for all the right reasons. She was a diminutive senior at Western Oregon, and she hit what looked like a 3-run homer against Central Washington in a game of softball. Never in her 21 years had she propelled a ball over the fence. She was so surprised by her own ability, she didn't have her home run trot in order. She gazed in awe and missed the first base. When she turned back to touch the bag, her right knee buckled, and she went down, crying and crawling back to first base. You might remember the story because what happened, the Seattle Times described next as a moment of grace. The opposing team's first baseman, Mallory Holtman, and shortstop Liz Wallace lifted Tutulski, hands crossed under her like a chair, and carried her to second base. Gently lowered her so she could touch the base. Then they repeated it, beginning to giggle. Tutulski, through her tears, began to laugh as well as the three of them continued this unusual procession to third base and finally home to a standing ovation. Afterward, Holtman was asked what inspired this impulsive gesture. She said she'd been taught by her coach, Gary Frederick, that winning is not everything. And Holtman's team didn't win that game, but in many ways they were the winners. It's losing to win. It's unlikely that Matthew 16 was on her mind when she did that moment of grace, but the fact it's still celebrated 10 years later shows that they were losing to win. An 8-year-old boy was stuck on his math homework. So he said, "Granddad, could you do this math question for me?" Granddad said, "I could, but it wouldn't be right, would it?" To which he said, "Oh, you can't do math either. I'll ask Mum." In 2019, it becomes more and more difficult to distinguish what is right and what is wrong. And I've heard it said in Christian circles that we, as part of God's kingdom, we need to turn the world upside down. We need to do all we can to make moments like Sarah Tutulski's 11 years ago now not the exception, but the rule. I embrace that sentiment, but perhaps it's not that the world needs turning upside down, but it already is. We need to turn the world the right way up. There's many things we say today that perhaps don't make a lot of sense. Here's a few examples. You play at a recital, but you recite at a play. You pay an extra 25 cents to get something put on your hamburger, but they don't give you 25 cents back if you take something off. Dodge makes a truck called Ram. But there's a lot of things that Jesus said that doesn't, perhaps at first glance, make sense. Here's a few examples. Jesus says that the way to be first is to be last. The way in is out. The way up is down. The way of success is service. The way to live is to die to self. The way to get the most is to go to the least. The way to be free is to hand over complete control to God. The way to win is to lose. So let us in this season of Lent go with Jesus to the cross, not to turn the world upside down, but to turn the world the right way up.